Hey friends, allocative efficiency refers to how efficiently resources are allocated to produce goods most wanted by society. Efficiency simply means making the best possible use of your limited, scarce resources. But before we dive into allocative efficiency, let's revisit what we know about demand and supply. So as we see in this graph, which shows a demand and supply curve, the demand curve can also be interpreted or be seen as a marginal benefits curve. If you think about it, we consume goods and services because they give us some degree of benefits. And this extra benefit we get from consuming each additional unit of something refers to our marginal benefit. And as we consume more of the same good, the prices we are willing to pay for that same good falls. Similarly, supply curves can also be seen as a marginal cost curve. Producers making goods and services incur cost of production, and every additional unit of output that a producer makes incurs an additional cost, which we call marginal cost. And producers are only willing and able to produce more goods as the price of that good increases, because they need to cover their increasing cost of production. So the bottom line is that we can see demand curves as a marginal benefit curve, which we call MB in this diagram, and supply curves as the marginal cost curve, which we call MC in this diagram. Allocative efficiency refers to the point whereby MB is equals to MC at market equilibrium. So allocative efficiency is this intersection over here, whereby MB equals to MC. And what this means is that the extra benefit to society of consuming a good is equal to the extra cost of producing this new good. Another angle to interpret allocative efficiency is through consumer and producer surplus. So this is reflected in this diagram, and I will be explaining what these colors and these diagrams and formula mean in more detail. So consumer surplus refers to the difference between the maximum price which consumers are willing to pay for the good and what is actually paid. So for example, imagine you want to purchase a wallet. You are willing to pay $500 for that wallet, but you manage to buy that wallet at $100. So you enjoy what we call a surplus of $400 because you got that wallet at $400 lower than what you are willing to pay. So you can say that you enjoyed this extra benefit. Consumer surplus is reflected in this diagram as the shaded area under the demand curve and above the market equilibrium price. So this is reflected in the diagram as this blue shaded area. To calculate consumer surplus, we find the area of the shaded triangle with this formula over here. Now, producer surplus is the exact same logic, but applied to producers. So it is the difference between the lowest price that a producer is willing to produce at and the price that producers actually receive. So now imagine instead of buying the wallet, now you are the person producing the wallet. And you know that you can make a wallet for $20, but you sell your wallet at $100. So again, we can say that you enjoy this surplus of $80 because you managed to sell the wallet for $80 higher than what you're willing to sell it at. And once again, in this diagram, producer surplus is reflected in this diagram as the shaded area above the supply curve and below the market equilibrium price. So in this diagram, producer surplus is reflected as a green triangle over here. And once again, to calculate producer surplus, we find the area of the shaded triangle, which is this formula over here. So looking at the diagram at market equilibrium, the sum of the consumer and producer surplus is at the maximum. So this particular sum is reflected as this highlighted yellow triangle. And at this point, the surplus is at the maximum. So we call this the social surplus because we assume that society is primarily made up of consumers and producers. And this yellow highlighted point is where MB is equals to MC, which is also the point where allocative efficiency is achieved. Welfare refers to the amount of consumer and producer surplus. And as you see in this diagram, where MB is equals to MC, reflected as this yellow point, social welfare is also maximized. Now, this also means that if society is not producing and not consuming at the market equilibrium, there is some degree of welfare loss. So it could mean that additional costs are outweighing additional benefits or vice versa. And this is especially applicable in the market failure chapter, which I discussed in a separate video series. But I just wanted to take this time to show how welfare loss is reflected in the diagram, as we see in this red triangle over here. So in this particular diagram, the market is actually only producing at QM, which is over here. So this is lower than the equilibrium quantity that the market is supposed to produce at. I will not dive too much into the explanation of what this means, but this particular diagram simply shows how welfare loss is reflected in a diagram and what this means in terms of consumer and producer surplus.